call?
Sure. Trustee Bree?
Here.
Trustee Hallwax?
Here.
Trustee Rubin? Here. We have a quorum.
All right. So, first day back. Did we come in one day? Did we have?
July.
Okay.
Last July.
Well, it's good to be back. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
All right.
All in favor? We don't have to do a roll call.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, all right.
All right, Nikki, do you want to go through financial reports?
Sure. Let's see. Okay, it's gonna be the first time that we're doing this.
You're good.
I should probably show it in presentation.
There you go.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Let me just-
If you're not screen sharing, it won't capture on the recording.
Hold, please. I guess we could just show it like this.
If you just tap it.
Okay.
Ta-da.
And then,
Yep.
that still works. Okay,
Ta-da.
perfect, all right. Let's get this figured out. Okay.
Technology.
So, tonight's agenda, we'll start with the February Treasurers Report, do a brief CIP update. The draft donation policy is coming back again, but it'll be really quick. And then a discussion on the financial report format. So, diving into the packet, into the Treasurers Report, it starts on packet page 6. Just a few highlights, all good news so far, although we're only 2 months into the year, so it's still a little early to be shouting from the rooftop. We are starting to see property taxes really come in quite a bit now. The bills actually went out on time this year, so that helps things quite a bit. We are higher than last year and at 18.8% of budget. We're about 2 months through the year, so that's just shy of 17%, so that's a good number on property taxes. Our state income tax is still coming in higher than last year and higher than budget targets. The governor did give his budget address, his proposal, in February, and there was no mention of income tax, but we are still trying to push that through the Northwest Municipal Conference to see if we can get that restored or partially restored. Sales taxes are also higher than last year. This is November sales, so we're at 21% of budget, which is a great number. The only one of the revenues that's lagging a little bit is permit revenue, and I'm not concerned about that at this point since it's so early in the year.
That's just for building, right?
Correct.
Okay.
On a water fund level, both the volumetric and fixed charge revenue is higher than last year. That's due to our phase-in of our new water rates. And we should start to see these catch up with budget targets over the summer. We start to see usage kick up a little bit more. On a cash flow projection, our sales taxes are still going gangbusters, a little less than last month's receipt, but still quite a bit higher than prior years, so we're still seeing those climb.
They're 156% of what they were in February of 2021.
Correct.
Okay.
So
Which are November 2020 sales.
So a big portion of that is the change in the law where we're now collecting a lot of sales tax on online sales that weren't
1% of what it is, yeah.
We're starting to see a little bit of a trade-off with use tax on that. So we're starting to see use tax decline a little bit and sales taxes are continuing to come up, but it's not a one-for-one yet. So we are still seeing a positive change in sales tax. When we look at all of our revenue, what we've received in the first 2 months of the year and what we're projecting for the rest of the year, we're looking at a positive revenue impact of $129,000 over budget, if everything were to happen as we predict for the rest of the year. On the water side, we're looking at a negative impact of $170,000. Again, that doesn't have summer usage in it, so that's a little misleading. So we do expect those numbers to pick up a little bit. But we do have a planned deficit in the water fund budget this year because of capital expenditures. So we borrowed, for the water replacement project, and have some grant funding that we received last year that we'll be spending this year, so we are expecting to draw down that fund balance. So no surprises there. Are there any questions on the treasurer's report? There's not a whole lot to note too much.
Yeah, one quick question. We used to see fund balance, there's like a little graph that we used to have. Do you still keep that?
We do.
Because I
We still have that, yeah. Fund balance graph, we can add that back in, and actually that's a really timely question, because we're gonna be talking about that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, we can add that back in, sure. Anything else? Okay, all right, moving right along, I will hand it over to Stella for the golf club update.
Capital review, we were able to get that 84,000-pound excavator out on the golf course, and we are emptying out our ponds in order to replace our intake pipes for our irrigation system. So it's a very big project. It's underway currently. Dave, our superintendent, is overseeing it, and it's going smooth so far. So that's a necessary evil probably every 20 years or so. We pull all of our irrigation out of that pond, which is all the runoff water from the neighborhood, and we have to fill it when it's not augmented with rainwater. So that's a big project that's almost done. Staffing challenges still exist. It's a very fierce competitive market for seasonals, competing against all park districts. Everyone's boosting up their hourly pay rates, their bonuses, et cetera, and trying to facilitate the onboarding process to make it easier to hire people. So we're still struggling a little bit in that category. We are opening tomorrow. Will be our first day of play for the season. We already have 100 people booked. Due to the nature of the market right now, we're coming full bore with our in-season rates. Typically, we stay in spring rates until usually the first week in May, but we're going in season and people are booking. So it's still a positive market for golf, and we're seeing that kind of demand. Pam Lungmis, who is our new campaign director for Friends, has started. She's been working with Dale Thomas, who's our chairman, and our vice president is investing and reviewing some of the top prospect lists that we have, and going to be setting up some in-person meetings next week. So hopefully we'll start seeing some action in the donation department.
What's our timeline now on the golf club? I mean, do we have one? Is it still sort of this?
I don't know that we have an exact time. We're trying to hit some pretty high numbers right now. I'd like to have like $2 million by the fall, probably more like by July. And then from that point, we could determine what we want to do as far as moving forward with any referendum or any other means if we want to continue to fundraise before we go to that point.
Okay.
But we are going full forward with going after the larger grants, donations right now.
Yeah. Would it make sense to bring this up more often, even in the board meeting? Just quick, here's our status for Clubhouse.
Sure.
I mean, just
Joe can report on that.
point it out.
Yeah. Yeah, and we
So
do hope to get more marketing out there now that we have Pam on board, and we have a little room in our Friends budget to hire a marketing person just to get the word out in the community.
Even if we put a link or anything on like the newsletter, just if you want to contribute.
Yeah, like I just got the caucus thing now. I mean, I think we could definitely hit people.
Well, and Glencoe Compass is coming out this week, I think, with the article, with the front page photo shoot, that was done, that's talking about the project, and so hopefully with a number of things kind of hitting at the same time, you start to build upon, the story starts to build upon itself.
Yeah, it'd be good momentum now that the season's starting again, and people are going to start coming out and have that article and Pam on board, so hopefully we'll start getting more information.
Yeah, I think we're a little behind where we wanted to be because we did have that staffing shift at the Friends, and I think, you know, now that Pam is on board and jumping in with both feet, I think that's gonna build some good momentum. She's got a good CV. I think she's gonna be really good for the Friends, so.
Thank you. Okay, moving on up, we have a CIP update.
On pages 51 through 52 of your packet is the March update report. On that report, you'll see some blue lines added. Those are the projects that were started in 2021 that were included in the budget amendment that was approved last month, so you can see the status of those as well. Other updates are also noted in blue. There will be 2 items coming to the board for consideration. One is the 1.5-ton truck, and also the sanitary sewer manhole rehab for the IICP project. And then the next schedule, the quarterly report, again, the items highlighted in blue, which are listed on the slide, have been updated. It's basically, date changes.
What does gray mean?
Gray, it's just for readability.
Oh, okay.
On the one storm sewer drainage improvements, we had approved 48,514, it says contract amount 346,555.
The 48,514 is the piece that was carried forward
Okay.
from, 2021, that was
So
approved.
it started in, I guess, for construction July 2021.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, the
It
board,
started last
the
year.
board approved the contract last year, that's just the carryover.
Yeah, okay.
Carryover engineering.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, moving right along. Draft donation policy is back again. This is
For the
on,
last time.
for the last time,
For a while.
hopefully. This is on the agenda for the village board on Thursday evening, but one thing that we wanted to bring before you was, since we met last, we've had a couple, fundraising requests from the Sustainability Task Force. One of them we talked about in the memo was, perhaps funding for a bird costume, to raise awareness about the official, bird of Glencoe. It's my understanding from Jeff that they've decided to pause, that program right now, so it's not necessarily an immediate need, but that got us thinking that those types of requests should probably be coming before the finance committee for your review and your approval, rather than having those made at the staff level. So, that was the addition that we made for the donation policy, just to add that definition of the task force committee, in there, and then also the requirement that it come before this board. Any questions on the donation policy? Okay.
So it hasn't changed since what we talked about last night, right?
Just the addition that any committee or task force of the village, if they decide they want to solicit donations, they need to ask the finance committee first.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the only change.
You're in after the bird costume clause.
I'm hoping we can get some comments on Thursday about the bird costume.
Is there a bird costume?
Not yet.
Not yet.
You wanted,
There,
whose idea was a bird costume?
Peter will
The
talk about
Sustainability Task Force has, they went through, as you may recall, a competitive process to select a, mascot for the community to raise sustainability awareness. It is Ruby, the scarlet,
red-throated.
red-throated
hummingbird.
That's it, the red-throated hummingbird, which you probably have seen on a number of, posters and such that the Sustainability Task Force is using, to promote various events and programs. They are talking about the possibility of commissioning the creation of a suit that somebody like Jeff could wear at public events, to generate interest and awareness, so.
Things like, the 4th of July parade.
To be honest, I think it would work.
It probably will, especially if Jeff wears it, 'cause we tried to, we were gonna get one for Hickey, but
I'm too short. It's not built for me.
Well, then we talked about getting one for Dave Mao, but then we said that would be scary because that would be such a large hummingbird, very tall hummingbird. So, but all kidding aside, they are looking at alternatives on how to do that. And there may be a fundraising component that goes along with it.
That's too much, but there was, went to some art fair when my oldest was 2. And somebody was wearing a bird costume and scared that one of my
There's a ringing endorsement.
It was a weird costume. It was an art fair, it wasn't a, anyway, sorry.
All good.
So if it comes back, you'll get to see a drawing of it, so, we'll see. Pretty good. Okay, any other questions on the donation policy? Okay, that'll come before the board for final approval on Thursday then. Okay, discussion on the treasurer's report format. So we've been talking about this for a while. We've had some changeover on the finance committee in terms of members. A lot has changed over the last couple of years. And we started with a treasurer's report and we kept adding to it. So we thought we would start talking about, kind of revamping the report, creating something that is valuable for all of you, to make sure that you're getting what you need. And then also if there's information in there that you're not reading or that you don't need, we can take it out. From a statutory standpoint, really the only thing that we're required to report on a monthly basis are cash accounts, the balance, in all of the accounts, a statement of all monies received, which we've interpreted to essentially be our revenues, and then a listing of all the invoices paid. So we do that today now with a separate line item, or a separate agenda item for all of our check registers. So that's approved separately by the board. But this is kind of the bare minimum of what we need. This is what we do today. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the executive summaries, the lengthy narrative at the beginning of the report. We do provide the cash balances. There's a fund summary that gets high-level revenue and expenditures, just a general revenue income statement, and then we have some detail pages. There's some trend information on property tax revenue, trend information on sales tax revenue. The expenditure report is reported by department. And then the personnel report, I think it's actually even in there twice. We do provide some information on public safety pensions, because that's really the only time that you would see that information, other than the annual actuarial report. The asset management dashboard is the status of our village investment portfolio. That's the idle cash that we have invested. The cash flow projections, which we've talked about at length, especially during COVID. Rate of change in revenue, so those are those 12-month rolling graphs. And then also, we talked about the check registers. So really what we were hoping for, and I can come back to that slide, is, what elements are you finding valuable to you? Is there anything that we can remove, or is there anything that you want to see that you're not seeing? We do have quite a bit of flexibility with our existing financial report. The report that we compile today, there's a lot of manual manipulation to it, just because we've kind of been changing things, on the fly as we went, especially during COVID, trying to make sure that we had a finger on everything. But we do have flexibility to provide other data. So I know one of the things that came up, obviously we have the fund balance graph that we can add back in. One of the things that came up at a prior meeting, I think Chair Ree, you brought it up, was information on online sales, if there's a way that we can break that out, so we can look at something like that. So I really just open it to the floor for any thoughts that you may have.
Okay, I wonder, can we pull it up on the screen?
The actual report?
Yeah. If you go to the website, if nothing else.
Sure.
The new one, or the
Just the current one that we have. Or, Joe, I don't know, do you have it open on your computer? I can make a quick copy. It may be easier if we're kind of speaking off of the same pages.
I'm sorry?
I have the report. Do you want
Sure,
to see it?
depends, yeah, I mean, you got the whole report,
I do.
because I do have a couple of thoughts.
Yeah, one question would be just, so these reports you mentioned, there's lots of manipulation, and the new system can hold stuff. I mean, should start fresh, and do you have, I mean, I think we take your lead. I mean, some of it is, we'd like it to be an easy report to produce that has all the information that we need. I do think, and I'm sure this is the hard part of the report, is the summary pages where you write stuff is very helpful. Beyond that, I'm pretty open to what you want to show us.
Other data.
Can I ask the really obvious question? Is
Thank you, so.
is part of the goal here to shrink this?
Part of the goal is to shrink it, to
That's
make
fair.
it a
What's
little
the
bit
most
more
time-consuming part?
easy to digest.
If you go back to the components.
The most time-consuming part,
We literally just did this at work, so I'm very sympathetic to this.
probably the most time-consuming part, unfortunately, is the cash flow projections, which I think is one of the more valuable components to the report.
Because we need it monthly, we do it quarterly.
So that is a way to look at this as well. Nikki and I were talking about that. You know, if we want to do a very detailed quarterly report and a less detailed monthly report, that's a way forward possibly. We don't want to take away the value of good information on a monthly basis though. And I think, you know, things like the cash flow projections, there's a lot that can change in a month. And I think what we see as valuable is being able to convey that to you, to dialogue if there are issues. Thankfully, we haven't had a whole lot of issues to worry about lately, but that was obviously different early on in the pandemic, and that could change again too. But I do think there are pieces of this perhaps that it could be shared on a more quarterly basis, trend analysis for property taxes and sales tax, things like that. We don't want, what we don't want to do is take something away from you that you see as very valuable on a monthly basis. So
Let's talk about that.
Yep.
In terms of trend reports for property taxes. You can understand what the lines mean right now, and I don't mean that pejoratively. I'm only sat for the CPA exam and I don't get it. It ain't because this is government accounting. The detail, the amount, the time, it's like, oh, great, because it doesn't tell me, it's not like a business that says, what are my February sales? Why were they so low? It's like, huh? Well, my February property taxes, well, let me see, they send the bills out twice a year, and useful information would be great in terms of overall trends, but what we have now is, I think, lots of detail without necessarily anything that's terribly helpful. Or sometimes we have, and again, I realize that this is let me say that these reports overall, phenomenal. Can't imagine how much time you spent. I should have said that first. And there's tremendous information. Anybody who wants to know what the heck's going on can read these reports because they're available to everybody, the whole community, and anybody outside the community. And it's all there. And that is phenomenal. And it is, and the write-ups, the intellectual part of it is fantastic. And I know it does that. But the part about, like, especially when you're viewing it on a screen or even on a piece of paper like this, and you've got 8 bars all next to each other that are supposed to represent, 17 different years of experience. And what am I seeing? What am I supposed to take from that? Why would I even know if there's any trend shown at all from that bar graph?
Right.
I mean, I've got to be really better at math to pull that one out. So my point being, some of this stuff, like the cash flow projections, fools like me can read those, understand those, and we look at what my fund balances and my projected fund balances are that we do now, which is great that you've added that. And so I can see that I'm not dipping below my minimum funds at any time during the year, not just at the beginning or the end of the year. That's all great, useful information. if there are other things that can give trend information that are simpler, that would be wonderful. But too much information is no information. The thing that appears in some places but not others, where it appears is great, especially because things can be choppy when they're not, similar month to month. Well, that was a dumb statement, of course, that was a tautology, but what I mean is, when I see even, revenue at this time of the year, and as you said, and here's what it was last year at this time, or expenditure, or whatever, that's really useful, right? Because that can tell me something about trend, and how we're doing or how we're not doing. Here might be because if we just say in other places in the report, here's our revenue, here's our budget for the year. I don't remember how much we thought we were going to spend by now of that budget. So when we tell me what the percentage of the budget is, even that, unless we're already over it, doesn't really tell me much. It only tells me what did we think we were going to be at, at that time, budget to date. And if you all think going back more than a year for particular types of things is useful, that's great, but we have to figure out how to present that in a way that is readable and useful. Sorry, I had too much coffee today.
That's all right. It's good feedback.
But like I said, a lot of this stuff, especially since given the nature of things, the fund reporting and the projected balances and where we're at and whether or not we're doing well or poorly with the investment and that type of that dashboard, that's actually, I think, very useful. And frankly, the upfront about, here's anticipated, here's off, here's this, here's that. That's the most, of course, because at the end of the day, the question I always have in my mind is, I'm looking for what's not what we expected. Mm-hmm. If everything is exactly as we expected, okay, that's great. Hopefully. Hopefully we expected it to be good and is good.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, it's, from a management perspective, don't we need to focus on what was unexpected?
Yes.
Shut up. Sorry.
Well, I think there's, obviously, I would say the shorter version is that there's room to cut it down for sure.
I will say this report is a bit of a Frankenstein, and Jonathan, you've spent the most time with it. I've been the chair of this committee for 7 years, and it's gone through a lot of iterations, but it's never really start to finish been redone. Nikki inherited it, made it better, and by that I mean made it clearer, but we added more information at the same time. And so what we've been talking about is, okay, if we had it to start over, if we were blank slating this, how would we lay it out so that the most important information is up front, the necessary information that the state tells us we have to have is there, and the other information is accessible, right? So if you're interested, after you've read kind of the important stuff up front, in getting more information, you flip to those pages near the end, and maybe we codify that in the text so we can say these are located in exactly at this location elsewhere in the report. I think that's one way for us at this level, the staff level, to bring something back to you to say, okay, this is the feedback we heard. These are the things that we think are responsive to that feedback. What do you think? And then you can kind of react to that. But I didn't want to cut off comments, but I did want to just say, don't feel beholden to the structure, because there's nothing magic about it. It just happens to be an iteration of what we've used for a long time, and it doesn't have to be.
So, in my view, I like the first few pages. I think that the qualitative stuff that you add is really helpful. And I would assume that's where a lot of it goes, 'cause
Right.
but that's really useful. That allows for us to quickly see everything. So, starting there, I like that, and I'm sure that's probably not even in the new system anyway. From there, I'm open to anything. I don't know about you guys, but what I would like is, I would like sort of a report where maybe we start general fund and move to water fund, not where it's mixed in there and we're kind of flipping back and forth.
Okay.
And, you know, first page of each section, high level, and then some of the detail. Just so, because the one thing I always find is I'm always trying to read, like, even when I've looked at this for 7 years, I still have to remember what I'm looking at each time.
Yeah.
And if it's, you know, if you have sections divided by, I don't know how to line by it, but whether, just figuring out a one where this is everything that we're gonna look at for this topic, and then move into the next. That rate of change stuff is, I mean, Gary's putting me on that. I do think, in certain cases, just seeing absolute numbers, so the graph I mentioned, like just fund balances are helpful, and graphs are a quick, easy way to look at it. We don't have to have them, but, if they're not hard to produce, just showing here's our fund balance, and if it's trending down, it'll be sort of obvious. Rate of change, rate of change is to try to predict it, it's not, so,
All right, there's no love lost, that's okay.
remember when those were? And some of the predictive stuff, like the cash flow, it is helpful. I don't know how often we need to see it. I guess it might be even more helpful if we did do it a little bit less often, so we actually talk about it, instead of just have it in there or not talk about it.
Sometimes when you weigh the pig every day, it doesn't change. If you give it a month, you'll have a change we're talking about.
That's a really good analogy, actually. I want to use that one.
So maybe maybe a quarterly, more detailed, even if it's a more detailed conversation. So if it's a lot of work to put something in there, then let's certainly make it less often. If it's not needed as often, and if it's an easy one, you just press a button, then I suppose not have it. Eating in there is okay, but
Yes.
so.
That's helpful.
Because we don't always talk about it. In fact, we
don't.
rarely talk about
Right.
it, except for.
Unless there's a problem, you know, we generally, and we haven't seen that, knock on wood, for a while now, that cash flow has really, if anything, kicked up a few notches. But early on, it was really important, right? We were talking about it every month, and that's when we made some really tough decisions on budget cuts. But that makes sense. That's a fair point, and I think that's something that, as we kind of contemplate how to put together the presentations, even, you know, let's focus not so much on the report as a whole, but perhaps pulling out some of those interesting pieces of it more frequently.
One thing I think that you all have been doing for a while, which is great, is on the financial projections and the financial, there's some, well, they're not charts, they're, you know, it's numbers, but it shows, okay, here's the operating expenses and revenues, and now here's what we're planning on taking from cashette, capital expenditures, pardon me. And, you know, taking out of the bank rather than asking anybody to pay extra in the community, that we just, that I think is really excellent and important, you know, because it shows what we're doing with the funds that are entrusted to us. And one of the reasons we do have reserves beyond a rainy day is all the capital work that we need and how infrequently we go to the community for the required road repairs and everything else that we do with the money. So I like that, you know, I think that actually happens to be a critically good provision.
That's helpful.
You know, I think we'd be all open to seeing because, you know, it's hard to, I can go through here and pick out the things, and then
Right.
I'll read it and think, well, that's actually kind of useful too, and then, like, it'd be nice to see, I think we can adjust as long as certain parts are in there, and we get those parts are, so,
And I think manual, number one, at least,
yeah,
issue for data quality,
absolutely.
errors, is it the best and highest value use of your time? Could anything manual go quarterly? I think that'd probably be the first way to go.
Okay. And that was kind of that's helpful, kind of our thought process was to start modifying the report and then have this be, it's going to be a process over a few months, so just kind of, how's this working for you, is there something missing? And then just continuing to get your feedback until we land on a form.
Everything for me is always comparative, so how is it going again? And I think, you know, prior year is helpful, but also just I mean, so, you know, percent of budget isn't useful if it's just the full budget, but if it's percent of that amount of time, I mean, and we've talked about this,
Yeah.
because, you know, it doesn't work where it's linear, where your budget's spending, but,
Right.
we spend time on the budget, and we balance the budget, and so knowing how we're doing relative to those expectations would be, you know, the idea is that we've done all the work in the budgeting, and so that if we're meeting budget, we're good. So I don't know if it's gotten easier to produce those sort of projections at the monthly level without, to Joe's point, nothing manual, like the idea is that it's just either month, if that's where the prior year can be helpful because it's linear the way.
Yeah,
Right.
give it context for it.
Mhm.
Yeah, because I always like that stuff is really helpful to me, mostly how it is relative to budget, or if we don't have something that's, you understand,
Mhm.
so.
Yeah.
Maybe as an example, this is, sales tax revenue report
Yes.
page. The sales tax revenue report, the sort of the breakdown, the graph at the top circle, that can be helpful, that highlights some things. And the numbers themselves